Hey there and welcome back to NBA 2K17. My name is Pete and today we complete the first year of NBA 2K17's MyGM or MyLeague mode with the Detroit Pistons. The star in Detroit is without a doubt Andre Drummond. I often need to be reminded that the guy is only 23. He is your centerpiece down low, locked down long term, and the majority of moves you make should focus on complementing him well. Your next go-to guy is probably Reggie Jackson at the point guard. He is your second 80+ player on the roster, 3 years older than Drummond, and also conveniently locked down for the next 4 years. On the other guard, the Pistons will start with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, another young and promising player with great skill on both ends of the floor. However, he is in his contract year and will likely demand a payday. Not necessarily right away because he is becoming a restricted free agent, but prepare to give him a large contract in the next 1 or 2 years. Last but not least, the forward position, where your two best players, Harris and Morris, are both listed as small forward. Morris is the better shooter, at least in 2K, and should therefore probably start over Harris at the 3. However, you can still keep Harris in the starting lineup by giving him the power forward spot where he is serviceable. Alternatively, you can bring him off the bench as your 6th man and start Jon Leuer at the power forward. Let's have a look at the bench in Detroit, which is solid at some positions while it has some holes at others. The point guard is well backed up with Smith and Udry. I would personally give the minutes to Smith simply because of his age and the fact that Udry is pretty slow for a point guard. The shooting guard is looking a bit less promising. Baynes and Hillard are both young but also not the best rated players on your team. On top of that, you will likely only be able to give one of them minutes if you decide to go with them. The other option would be to run with sharpshooter Reggie Bullock as the backup at the 2. He is listed as a small forward but can play both positions, and that would avoid clogging the small forward spot where, even if they both start, Harris and Morris share most, if not all, the minutes. Keep in mind that Bullock is only slightly better rated than Baynes and Hillard, and even Stanley Johnson is not too far away to make a claim for minutes. That brings us straight to the power forward spot, and no matter whether or not Harris starts here or backs up the small forward, Jon Leuer will see significant minutes at the 4. Behind him, the Pistons have a bit of a gap, at least at first glance, because the rest of your big men are centers. If you consider, however, that both Baynes and Ellenson are actually higher rated when switched to the power forward, the problem becomes less serious. Even if you don't outright switch them, you should at least assign both of them the power forward as the secondary position. At the center, Drummond will play heavy minutes, and while Marjanovic is a beast at 7'3", you could also argue for Baynes as the backup. A potential lineup for the Pistons could look something like this. Heavy minutes for the starters, Jackson with 33, backed up by Ish Smith, then Kentavious Caldwell-Pope also with 33, and I decided for Bullock as the backup. At the small forward, Morris will play around 35 minutes, and whenever he sits, Harris can slide in. That means Harris will only play 22 of his minutes at the power forward, and for the rest of the time Leuer plays the 4. Drummond also gets heavy minutes, and backing him up is Marjanovic, who got the nod simply because you can't teach size. That now comes down to a small 9-man rotation, and we see a lot of players that simply can't get an opportunity on this roster. Keep that in mind for the moves later on. Up next, let's have a look at the expiring contracts in Detroit, and the list includes most notably Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who should be brought back under all circumstances. Beno Udry also expires, but looking at the rotation you're probably not losing much here, but his trade value is something to keep an eye on. Reggie Bullock expires as well, and depending on if you want him back or not, you can also already give his spot in the rotation to someone else to not disrupt things. Other than that, you have Aron Baynes, who holds a player option worth $6.5 million. However, thanks to a well-stacked frontcourt rotation, you don't depend too much on him taking that. You also have 3 players with team options, that's Baynes, Hillard and Johnson, basically your entire backup squad at the 2 and 3 apart from Bullock. Bringing at least 2 of them back should be a no-brainer. Now, while the Pistons are probably not going to end up at the bottom of the league, they are not the deepest team, and one major injury could screw up the season. So it's good to know that they have their 2017 first-round draft pick. The second rounder is in Utah and can probably stay there. For 2018 and 19, the Pistons have both their first and second rounders, plus an extra second rounder in 2019 that offsets the fact that they don't have one in 2020. In terms of picks, nothing to worry about here. Let's have a look at cap space next, and for this season the Pistons have already exceeded the salary cap. However, in the next one they are slightly below the threshold. That does, however, not include team and player options, so should Baynes pick up his option, those $3 million of room will be gone. On top of that, there are also still team options to take care of, and the one for Johnson is also above $3 million, and that is especially problematic since you want to bring back Caldwell-Pope too. Not only is he a restricted free agent, but the Pistons also have bird rights for him, so they can go over the cap to re-sign him, but unless you get rid of at least one large contract, you will live above the cap for the next few seasons. And now, going into year 1 in Detroit, here are your 3 key questions for the Pistons. Number 1, who gets the backup spot at the shooting guard? I already outlined several possibilities. In total you have 4 players who could realistically get the nod, and it's mostly up to your personal preference and playstyle who you pick. Number 2, do you put all your eggs in the starting lineup basket, or do you build a stronger bench mob? In the rotation I just outlined, the 5 best players all play heavy minutes in the starting lineup, while the bench looks a bit depleted with only 4 guys. Bringing either Harris or Morris off the bench is an alternative that you should consider if your bench unit struggles too much. And number 3, who gets put on the trade block? There is at least one obvious trade target on the team, and then you have 1 or 2 groups where you can say, yeah, I should probably get rid of someone in there. Those 2 groups are likely your backup squad at the 2 and 3, as well as the 3 centers behind Drummond. Now, before we go into the moves, I should quickly note that for the sake of realism in this video, I consider absolutely untradeable Drummond, Jackson, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Morris, Harris, Lure, and Smith. With Lure and Smith you could argue, but I think they fill their roles nicely, and there are more pressing issues, so they get to stay. And now, here are 3 moves to make with the Detroit Pistons in year 1. Number 1, trade Beno Udrih. It is the most obvious move to make. Udrih is way older than anyone on the team, his contract expires anyway, he won't get minutes, and his trade value is solid. There are so many good reasons to trade him that I honestly consider this more or less a must. Your target could either be a draft pick, I was offered several late first rounders for the years 2018 and beyond, or a more definitive solution for the backup shooting guard. If you're not going for picks, then your list of potential targets includes Josh Richardson from Miami, however initially that is a bit lopsided, but put a future first or 2 second rounders in there and it can be considered borderline realistic. Alternatively, a combo of Udrih and Baynes for Richardson and Haslem works as well, and you can get Baynes' player option off the books and let Haslem go after the season to effectively free up $6.5 million in cap space. Another target would be Glenn Robinson from Indiana, again here I would add some picks to make this a bit more realistic, or Troy Daniels from Memphis, who would bring some excellent shooting at a low price for the next 3 years, but you would have to add someone to make the salaries work and also convince the Grizzlies. That someone could potentially be Reggie Bullock, accompanied by a few picks if you can live without them. Keep in mind that you could always go the easy way and sign Lance Stephenson after clearing a roster spot for him. I went with Udrih and 2 second rounders for Robinson, mainly because I felt that in Indiana, behind Ellis, Stuckey, George and Miles, he simply won't get an opportunity, something that we can give him as the go-to backup off the bench for 15 to 20 minutes. Move number 2 will be the second and last trade of this video, however I will outline 3 different options. They all concern the 4-man group of backup players at the 2 or 3. Option number 1 would be to trade Stanley Johnson, because for some reason 69 rated Stanley Johnson, literally the worst player on your team, although not by far, has a crazy high trade value. The list of guys you can get for him, just as an example, includes Doug McDermott and the future first rounder from Chicago, Thabo Sefolosha and the future first rounder from Atlanta, Tyler Johnson and Josh Richardson, or Zaza Pachulia and the future first rounder from the Warriors. Now I know that Johnson is only 20 years old and that he will likely improve and that his potential is an 81 and pretty good, so I can understand that you might be hesitant to trade him, so here's option 2, Reggie Bullock. Bullock is an expiring contract, already 25 years old, so it's almost guaranteed that he won't become a star all of a sudden, and apart from shooting he does not really shine at anything else. His value is considerably lower than Johnson's, but here's what you can get for him. From Phoenix, John Jenkins, or better said a 1-year cap space reduction and another 17 second rounder in exchange for your 2019 one. Or effectively a second rounder from OKC when you consider the fact that you will likely let Josh Huestis go after the season. Not intrigued so far? Then how about option number 3, Darren Hilliard? He is a bit younger than Bullock, which slightly increases his trade value, and while Bullock is actually a pretty lethal shooter, Hilliard is solid in many things, but good in none of them, apart from dunking maybe. For him I only found 2 good trades, but those can be considered steals. The first one would be for Willie Hernan-Gomez from New York, who would actually straight up become your second highest rated center and comes at a ridiculously cheap price for the next 4 years. The second one would be a straight up trade for Malcolm Brogdon from Milwaukee. Attention here, if you go with Hernan-Gomez, then you should strongly consider trading away Marjanovic before the deadline. Giving significant minutes to both is hard, and you don't need Boban to eat away $7 million of your cap space every year for not playing. In the end, I went with Hilliard and a second rounder for Brogdon, and here is the final rotation after those moves. We now have a 10-man rotation in which both Brogdon and Robinson already see minutes. Brogdon backs up KCP, while Robinson splits his minutes at the 2 and 3. Harris now also comes off the bench to be the first scoring option in that lineup, in which he will play the majority of his time at the power forward next to Marjanovic. Now, move number 3 would be to re-sign Kentavious Caldwell-Pope if you can. Chances are that he won't be willing to sign an extension before free agency starts. The same can be true for Bullock. If you have the option, lock down KCP, Bullock is not a priority. Otherwise, move on to free agency. Now, a playoff spot should be a realistic target unless one of your stars suffers a long-term injury. If you're lucky, you can make it to the second round, but not much further. Your pick will likely fall somewhere in the late first round, so if your draft class is deep, you might grab a steal, otherwise you can consider it a trade asset if you want to make moves in the offseason. If you head into the draft at around the 20th spot, I would target the point guard, simply because a third man here can't hurt. When it comes to options, Baynes will more than likely accept his player option, and that kills any cap space you had. Now, you might as well accept the rest of the team options if you have some available. I traded for Robinson, so he will return, the same goes for Stanley Johnson. I actually declined Benijay to save a spot on the roster because after signing a rookie we are one too many. If you prefer Benijay over whoever you picked, you can of course switch that around. Both Reggie Bullock and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope are restricted free agents and can be extended a qualifying offer, and I would do so with both of them. KCP is a no-brainer, and Bullock is probably your best shooter by now, unless you traded him. For KCP, be ready to match offer sheets. Bullock, however, should likely come back on his own. By the way, if you want to save a bit of money for Bullock, you can always decide not to extend the qualifying offer and offer him a normal contract in free agency. That should turn out cheaper, but it is not much and you are over the cap anyway. And with that, I think we've taken care of everything there is in year 1 with the Pistons. Let me know down below in the comments how you would handle Detroit in MyGM or MyLeague. Leave a thumbs up if you like this video, or if you want to support the channel, then click the subscribe button. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!